burning from his tail to his shoulders. The world grew dim around him as the pain swallowed every one of his senses. Then it was all over. Above Folos, Nessus was basking in his wild strength. He had not felt this surge of power since the wedding, and he relished every moment of it. He zeroed in on Heracles, the pompous hero. He watched as Heracles slaughtered his kind left and right, as if he was squashing bugs. Deep rage coursed through Nessus's body. A moment later, he was seized with an impulse that would show Heracles just how powerful a centaur was. And unlike Folos, Nessus would not ignore his passions. He would find Heracles' wife and teach this so-called hero a lesson. He ran wildly.
Watch out, vehicle stopped on shoulder ahead.
Through the trees. The wine clouded his rational human thoughts. Only his bestial half remained, and it wanted blood. He ran and ran, not feeling the branches cut at his face and chest, not feeling his limbs fatigue. His instincts urged him onward. He flared his nostrils, soon catching the sweet smell of a human woman. She was not far. Nessus burst into a clearing, startling the lovely Deianira as she knelt beside a fire. She stood in fear and backed away at the sight of this wild beast with drunken fury in its eyes. Nessus took in her beauty, her isolation, her defenselessness. His rage dissipated, and lust soon took its place. He had to have her. Nessus let out a bellowing neigh and charged. He grabbed Deianira and threw her onto his back. Deianira let out a cry as Nessus charged through the forest. He would bring her to the mountains in the east, far from here. There, he'd take her for his own. His breath came out in sharp, abrupt bursts as he tore through trees and leapt over rocks, until finally he came to a river. He charged into the cold water without hesitation. Deianira cried for help as the strong currents washed around them. Nessus forced himself onward, breathing heavily as he worked through the rough water to the other side. But his movements were slowing. The icy river had awakened him somewhat. His eyes began to dim, and his body slumped with exhaustion. He struggled through the currents and finally made it to the other side. There, he knelt down to allow Deianira off his back. She stared at him, her eyes full of fear. In that moment,
Police reported ahead.
Nessus realized that she was looking at him as one might look at a monster. Shame flared within him, and he growled, "Do I disgust you?" He jerked backwards as an arrow sprouted from his chest. Nessus looked down at the arrow, his hand trembling as he touched the mortal wound. He looked up to see Heracles stepping from behind a tree. Nessus stared in fury at the demigod and his wife. They would get to live on, content in their superiority, while the legend of Nessus would be that of a monster. He lunged forward and grabbed Deianira's hand to haltingly whisper, "Take my blood, take it." His final words to her were barely above a whisper.
Watch out, vehicle stopped on shoulder ahead.
"You may find me repulsive, but my blood, it's as good as a love charm." As soon as the words left his mouth,